Hi guys, my name is Dr. Whitney Kosters. I'm a professor of English, and in a recent video, I explained why nonfiction, especially informational texts, isn't the less human part of English class, but rather the material where students get to learn how the world is explained to them, and how those explanations shape what they notice, believe, dismiss, and who they're willing to see. I have linked that video below if you want the full framework, because this video is the teaching example. I know a lot of teachers are trying to do something more with texts while also getting through a very demanding curriculum, and that can be really challenging, especially when informational reading often gets pushed into main idea, evidence, rhetorical devices, and test prep. So I made this video specifically for middle and high school English teachers who want to show students why nonfiction belongs in English class in a very human and necessary way. So I've chosen to examine Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham Jail because it is a perfect example of how a beautiful, urgent, deeply human text can easily get reduced to a lesson on rhetorical devices if we're not careful. Now, rhetorical devices are important and they have their place. But if students only learn to label the devices, they're going to miss what King is actually doing with them. They'll miss that King is showing readers what happens when public language makes human suffering easier to overlook. The clergymen King responds to don't sound like villains. Their letter sounds measured, civic-minded, and serious. They describe the demonstrations as unwise, untimely, and disruptive, and their language makes patience sound responsible, order sound moral, and moderation sound safe. The problem is that that kind of language offers the reader relief, and so a reader can think, oh, reasonable people are handling this issue. The concern is real, but maybe the urgency is too much. Maybe the protests are too disruptive. Maybe more time is needed. Maybe the people asking for patience know what they're doing. That is a real and common danger that King is confronting. The explanation lets the reader feel ethical without feeling the cost. And unfortunately, this still happens all the time today. Urgent human problems get described in language that lowers the urgency for people who aren't being harmed. People in pain get called dramatic, angry, divisive, extreme, irresponsible, or difficult. Institutions release careful statements. Headlines turn suffering into controversy. Public language gives people a way to feel informed while staying detached from the human beings affected by the issue. King's letter teaches students how to recognize that move so that they can still see it in their world outside of a text. So when King describes what waiting means, the teaching goal can't be students will identify emotional appeal. It's not enough. King has to make waiting human again. From far away, wait can sound mature and patient, and it can sound like the adult thing to say. Then King puts life back into the word. He brings in the child who can't go to an amusement park simply because of the color of her skin. He brings in the parent trying to explain racism to that child. He brings in humiliation, fear, exhaustion, and the slow violence of being told that dignity can come later. And that is extremely powerful because it returns the human being right back to the center of the issue. What you have to emphasize is that King takes a public conversation that has turned people into a problem to be managed, and he brings back the child, the parent, the body, the memory, the wound, the life being lived inside one word: wait. And this is why rhetoric matters and why we teach it. The device is the way King restores connection, and the connection is what keeps urgency alive. When the human being disappears from the explanation, the urgency disappears too, and suddenly the issue becomes something people can discuss instead of something they have to confront. The suffering starts to feel manageable, and so the reader can delay concern because the person carrying the pain has been kept just far away enough. In this essay, King refuses that distance by reconnecting language to humanity. And once that connection is restored, the reader cannot honestly treat the issue as slow, abstract, or comfortably debatable anymore. So this is where you can make the letter come alive. Before you ask students, what is King's main idea? Ask, what version of reality has his audience already accepted? His critics have framed the protest as the source of tension, but King changes that understanding by showing that the tension was already there and that direct action made it visible. When his critics treat waiting as a responsible request, King makes us face what waiting costs when people have spent their lives absorbing the pain of delay. At his critics' call to appeal to order, King presses on the deeper question. What kind of order deserves protection if it depends on silence, exclusion, and humiliation? So this is where students begin to see the real work of the text. The conflict is over meaning. King is fighting over the words his audience uses to understand the world. So, ask your students, what does wait mean when the person saying it doesn't have to live inside the waiting? What does order mean when the existing order protects one group and humiliates another? What does tension mean when the pain was already present before protest made it visible? What does law mean when legality and morality have separated from each other? What does moderate mean when the middle position asks suffering people to remain quiet for someone else's comfort? Those questions teach students that definitions shape what a reader can recognize. Now, the word moderate is one of the most important places to slow down. King's criticism of the white moderate can be uncomfortable to teach, but it's one of the clearest places where students can see the human force of the letter. He is talking about people who may believe in justice as an idea while resisting the disruption justice requires. That's a very hard truth, and it deserves time. King shows that someone can admire fairness, dignity, equality, and peace while still treating another person's urgency as inconvenient. Someone can prefer a calmer tone, a cleaner method, a better time, and a more respectable form of protest without asking why the suffering has lasted long enough to deserve protest in the first place. That is such an important lesson for students because it shows them that values can become very easy to claim when they cost us nothing. Justice can become a word people admire from a distance. Compassion can become a feeling people approve of without having to change what they tolerate. Peace can become a preference for quiet rather than a commitment to human dignity. That's why King has to keep bringing the reader back to the people living inside the issue. Without that human connection, a reader can easily keep feeling reasonable and decent, and they can keep wanting justice eventually, as long as eventually doesn't disturb them right now. This is still one of the most relevant parts of the letter because students are going to see versions of this everywhere. They will see people praise kindness while dismissing someone's pain. They will watch people claim to value fairness while asking the harmed person to express that harm more politely. And they will encounter people say that they support change while objecting to every form that change takes. And when they see these things, they will have the language for recognizing that contradiction because of the way you taught them nonfiction. They will have learned that the danger is not always open cruelty, that sometimes the danger is comfort with a moral vocabulary, or people who have the right values in theory, but whose language, timing, and desire for order protect the very things those values should be making them challenge. This is informational reading at its most important. A writer does more than present information. A writer names the problem, chooses the starting point, defines the important words, decides what counts as evidence, and guides the reader toward a way of seeing. And King understands that the public explanation has to change before the moral response can change. So, the teaching sequence can be clear without turning the letter into a whole worksheet. Start with the explanation King is answering. What story have his critics told themselves about protest, timing, order, and responsibility? Then move to the words controlling that explanation: weight, order, tension, law, moderation, extremism. Ask students how those words sound from the clergyman's position before they study how King changes them. After that, trace how King reconnects those words to human consequences. His examples are not there so students can write pathos, ethos, and logos and then move on. They are there because public language has separated the issue from the people living inside of it. Finally, ask what the reader understands differently by the end. The strongest question is not, what did King argue? It is, what did King make harder to ignore? That is a different kind of informational reading than simply finding the central idea and then moving on. Literature often helps students understand the inner lives of people, their fear, pain, their dignity, their courage, and their outrage. And Letter from Birmingham Jail shows that informational text can carry that same human urgency because public arguments are never only about ideas. As I've said many times in this lecture, people live inside the consequences of those ideas, and students desperately need this beyond the classroom. They're going to spend their lives hearing people explain to them before they understand those people. Someone is going to be called disruptive. Someone's going to be called dramatic. Others will be called angry, extreme, lazy, difficult, sensitive, irresponsible, or dangerous. And those labels often sound reasonable because the suffering underneath the behavior has been left out. But they will have learned from King's letter and from you that there's a way to resist the first explanation they receive, because it will help them ask, what pain has this explanation trained me not to see? This question is a reading skill, and it's a human skill. It teaches students to slow down before they judge. It reminds them to look for the human reality behind public language, and it shows them that people's reactions often come from histories, pressures, wounds, and humiliations that are not visible in the first version of the story they hear. I hope this gave you some real direction in your pedagogy and in your class. If it did, be sure to subscribe here on YouTube and TikTok and check out my variety of teaching guides. I have one on A Modest Proposal if you are interested in that nonfiction work. And I would love for you to share your thoughts with me on this video. I hope to see you guys in the next one. Be well.